Tonight, we reveal the dark side of Australia's rooftop solar obsession.
The solar industry does have its dark horse.
Given the outlay and the investment that you make, you would expect a product to last a lot longer than 4.5 years.
Australian consumers are notorious and they're known overseas for caring a lot about price and for not caring very much about quality.
Yes, people are losing their homes.
And the controversial cerebral palsy treatment that has parents paying a fortune.
It's a big surgery. It's permanent, it's irreversible.
When we approached them, it was taboo.
The doctors here generally say it's still not a proven treatment. What do you say to that?
Why won't they open this up to every kid that needs it in Australia?
Rooftop solar is considered one of Australia's renewable energy success stories. But an audit of the Clean Energy Regulator has found there are potentially tens of thousands of badly installed and even unsafe systems on rooftops. Some experts even believe Australia's become a dumping ground for poor quality solar products. Liz Hobday takes a look at the big picture, including how effectively or otherwise solar is helping Australia meet its clean energy targets.
Rex Layton spent $8,000 installing solar panels on his Wollongong home.
To look to have longer term, smaller electricity bills, and secondly, there's a desire to try and move towards renewable energy, and we wanted to be a part of that.
After just 4.5 years, they're headed for the tip.
Made me feel a bit sick really, because the warranty was for 10 years on the product, and we're expecting a substantially longer time than that.
The 20-panel system had been damaged by water.
These can't be fixed. There's no way of reversing the issue that they have with them. They're basically just dead panels.
Johan Fleury's company is taking down the panels and replacing them.
A large amount of those earlier panels since I'd say 2008 all the way till probably about 2014, a lot of those panels that have gone up on roofs have come back down off roofs.
Johan is just one of dozens of solar installers 730 has spoken to, who say poor quality rooftop solar is all too common.
You'll have bottom of the barrel sort of guys going out there and smashing it out and trying to get it in as best as possible and as quick as possible for as little money as possible. But they're the systems that are likely to last 2 years, and then I'll be there going there and replacing those systems. And I don't want to be doing that.
One of the industry's peak bodies, the Clean Energy Council, has the power to accredit solar products and installers. Last year, the council suspended 160 solar installers and cancelled the accreditations of 12 more. It also struck more than 5,500 models of solar panel off its list of approved products.
So the solar industry does have its dark horse. There's a lot of things that are wrong or negative within the solar industry.
As a consumer, it's very hard to tell what you've bought. Consumers are sometimes getting what they think they're getting and sometimes not.
In Canberra, Dr Michelle McCann runs one of the few laboratories in Australia that conducts commercial testing of solar panels. She's measuring how much electricity a panel can produce from a single flash of light.
You can't tell by looking at the outside of a panel whether it's going to be good or bad, and you can't tell by looking at the brand name of a panel whether it's going to be good or bad. We've had the same brands performing well and also poorly, and they are brand names that you would expect to perform well.
In some tests, new panels have produced about 10% less energy than their advertised rating.
To my mind, raises questions then about what that panel is going to do after 1 year or 3 or 5, let alone 25 years in the field.
She says manufacturers overseas are sending poor quality batches of solar panels to Australia, believing they'll never get caught.
Australian consumers are notorious and they're known overseas for caring a lot about price and for not caring very much about quality. And when that happens, you get the cheaper product, and the cheaper product isn't the better performing product.
Do you think Australia has a problem with low quality solar that has been installed in the past that is still on people's roofs?
No, I don't think Australia has a problem, and I think what we've got here is a minimum standard that ensures safety and a minimum level of quality for solar systems.
About 1 in 5 homes has rooftop solar. Australia's clean energy regulator has inspected just over 1% of them. Of those, 1 in 6 installations was found to be substandard and 1 in 30 unsafe. Late last year, the Australian National Audit Office found it's likely there would be hundreds of thousands of substandard installations and tens of thousands of unsafe solar systems across the country. The Clean Energy Regulator declined an interview with 730, but the Clean Energy Council says the vast majority of solar systems are safe, and an unsafe rating is not as bad as it sounds.
Well, we need to be clear, firstly, that this categorisation is about potentially unsafe systems, and we're obviously very focused on continuing to reduce that number, and the regulatory framework in place that applies to the product and also the way in which it's installed, we believe is working, and that's because the number of unsafe systems is continuing to reduce over time.
State and territory authorities conduct their own checks on rooftop solar, but some are more comprehensive than others. In Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT, authorities inspect every system that's installed, while in some other states there are regimes of targeted inspections. But 730 understands that some states have become increasingly dissatisfied with the national regulator's testing regime.
An explosion has destroyed a home in Ellenbrook.
He believes it was the home's solar power inverter that went off.
Had the solar panels connected to lithium-ion batteries in the garage for around a year and suspects that the fire began somewhere near the batteries.
My role is to determine cause and origin of fires.
At Melbourne's Metropolitan Fire Brigade, fire investigator Steve Attard is working in the evidence room. He's sorting through the remains of a solar system that was responsible for a house fire late last year.
In the last 5 years, we've had 25 fires approximately involving solar systems. People are losing their homes.
Both the fire brigade and the regulator have pointed to problems with a safety measure that was introduced about 15 years ago. It's a switch to shut off the flow of power from solar panels called a DC isolator.
This is a DC isolator that was up in the roof.
The units can be damaged by water and then catch fire, spreading across the roof before anyone notices.
Certain brands have been recalled, but there's still a great number of the old isolators still out there in service, which at some point in time will pose a risk.
The Clean Energy Council has been calling for a review of the requirement for rooftop DC isolators because we think it is an appropriate point in time to reflect on the intent of these devices and indeed the extent to which they're actually making the system safer.
Are they making solar systems less safe?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence of that at this point in time.
Attractive government subsidies have driven the massive growth in demand for rooftop solar. Now there are fears that Australia could repeat the same mistakes with the next big boom in household energy, home batteries. The National Audit Office has found the risks of batteries include electric shock, gas explosion and fire. About 60,000 batteries have already been connected, but Australia still doesn't have agreed minimum safety standards for their installation. The Clean Energy Council has accredited almost 1,000 people to install home batteries. Do you think the market then has got ahead of regulation?
Home batteries are fundamentally very safe, and we need to remember that these type of batteries have been used in cars for many, many years, electric vehicles. They're also not dissimilar to the batteries that are in many people's homes in the form of their cordless power tools.
But the concerns about rooftop solar aren't just about safety. Industry veteran Marcus Lambert sells high-end systems and says poor quality solar doesn't help reduce Australia's carbon emissions.
The problem is in many cases it hasn't even gained its CO2 back by the time it's failed. So you've actually got the irony that we're paying a rebate for solar that hasn't helped with abatement.
He too has teams of installers removing failed and unsafe solar systems from rooftops.
Right now in Australia, for all those failed panels, we don't even have a mandatory recycling scheme. So when these panels fail, they end up at the local tip and there's no scheme for recycling and we have the product failing. That's a failure.
Given these issues, is Australia's market for renewable energy working as it should? One of the big selling points of solar is the government incentives that reduce the cost of solar systems and form the basis for the national trade in carbon abatement. When someone installs solar panels, a renewable energy certificate is created, which assumes the panels will produce clean energy for 12 years. But if the solar panels fail after just a few years, the certificate can still be bought by a company to offset its emissions. This market for certificates from rooftop solar as well as wind and solar farms is worth $1.5 billion a year and rising.
We're drawing less from the grid, so we're providing for ourselves a bit.
It's a feel-good thing. It feels good to do stuff like that. Like, it feels good, I think.
The Taylors live in Melbourne's west and run a business making signs for the city's galleries. Earlier this year, they spent about $4,000 on a rooftop solar system.
Most of the retailers I spoke to warned of the cowboy approach of the installers and some retailers. So you kind of look at that and you just opt for the ones that are certified by the Clean Energy Council.
But when John Taylor went to apply for the Victorian government's rebate to get half his money back, he found the rebate program had suddenly closed just hours before.
And that was at 9 o'clock. So for a matter of 2.5 hours, if I'd have got up a bit earlier, I probably would have got a rebate.
It's disappointing that we're not going to get it, but I imagine it would hurt other people more than us.
Like the 2 million other homes and businesses that have invested in rooftop solar, the Taylors are full of good intentions. They can only hope they're getting what they paid for.
There's more work to be done. I don't think anyone disputes that. But again, we need to reflect on the actual outcomes for householders here. The audit data shows that systems are becoming safer and safer. We've got over 2 million Australian households with rooftop solar and very, very few actual incidents relating to safety within the industry.
When you put a solar installation on your roof, you're putting a little mini power station on your roof. You would never ever build a coal-fired power plant without doing quality checks on it, but we're doing that with solar rooftops.
That story was produced by Sibylla Gross. 1 in 700 Australians